Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to implement the robot class. And hopefully we're going to make our first end-to-end test. We can infer the needed functions and methods under robot class from the previous applications, iOS and Android application. And the robot creates a new class. Let's call it robot. This robot class is going to encapsulate UI automation actions using Windows driver. Speaking of which, we have to inject here the Windows driver of type Windows element. Let's call it driver. Now, as first function that we have to implement, which is wait for an element by accessibility identifier to be visible, it has to give us iWeb element, which is nullable, the string ID, integer, timeout in seconds. Now we have to check if the driver is null. We're going to throw an exception to ensure driver is available. Now to await for a certain element to appear or to exist, we have to use an instance of WebDriver wait. We have to pass as an argument driver and the timeout. This is going to explicitly wait for an element. Now we have to return wait until we can find the element. Let's surround this with try catch. Now we have to check if the dependency of type Windows element. If it's not, we have to make an error return. We can use WinDriver to find the element by accessibility ID, and we have to pass as an argument the ID. Now for the exceptions, if there is no such element, we're going to return null. And if we have, for example, WebDriver exception, return null. And for the other way around, to wait for an element to be gone. First of all, we have to check if we have the driver. Otherwise, we're going to throw invalid operation exception. Next, we have to implicitly wait for the timeout by doing driver and manage timeouts and implicit wait from second timeout seconds. Now we are waiting for 5 seconds and we have to return driver and find element by accessibility ID. And perhaps there are multiple elements with this kind of accessibility ID. Let's check the count with S is 0. We need another function to wait for an element to appear and to click on this particular element. We're going to use wait for element by accessibility ID to throw an exception, no such element exception. Now we have basically the element. We can do element and click. All right. Sometimes you want to wait and check if a certain element exists. It's going to basically allow us to wait for an element to appear. We're going to use wait for element by ID because if past this particular function, we are sure that this element has been found. Without waiting, let's create a function that's going to allow us to check immediately that an element exists. If we don't have the driver, we're going to throw an invalid operation exception. Next, we have to return using the driver, find elements by ID. We have more than one element. Now let's attempt to find a UI element. Let's call it try get UI element. First of all, we have to check if we have the driver as usual. And because the function under driver find elements by ID can throw an exception, we have to surround this block with try catch. And when you see something like try get or try do something under WPF or C# in general, which means that's going to omit the exception handling and return a nullable value instead of handling the API exception. Find elements by accessibility ID, and in case of exception or no such element exception, going to return null. Another useful function actually, which is get UI element by ID. As usual, if we don't have the driver, we're going to throw invalid operation exception, driver not initialized. Next, we're going to return from the driver, find elements by ID and pass in the ID. Now for the scroll capability of the robot, we're going to implement a function that's going to scroll through a scrollable container until the target element becomes visible. Let's make it as reusable as possible. It's going to give us a Windows element. As parameters, we need the scrollable container ID. We need the target elements ID, and we have to set the maximum attempts if we cannot find the element and the timeout and the scroll direction. For the scroll direction, I'm going to create here a public enum. I'm going to call it scroll direction. It has down and up. By default, we have to scroll down. As usual, we have to check if we do have the driver. Next, we need to look for the scrollable container. By using the function wait for element by accessibility identifier, 1 second. If we're not able to find it, we're gonna throw no such element exception. Now let's try multiple scroll attempts to reveal the target element. According to the direction, we need to send the key page down or page up. We have to send the keys and page down, otherwise page up. Let's wait for the timeout, read and sleep. Let's try to get the element and return that particular element by using driver and find element by accessibility identifier target element. If we're not able to do that according to the max attempt, I'm gonna return here null. We can define another method that's going to scroll without the target element and without returning the Windows element. It's gonna be the same thing. Instead of returning the element, we're not gonna return anything. We're going to continue scrolling until reaching the maximum attempts. Let's check first of all if we have the driver. Otherwise, we're gonna throw an invalid operation exception. Next, as we have done earlier, let's get the scrollable container. Start from 0 to attempts to scroll basically. And we have to wait between scrolls for UI to settle. That's it. And since we need to hover over the products card in order to bring the toggle button into frame, we need this kind of function. First of all, we need the driver, otherwise invalid operation exception to be thrown. Now let's initialize the action, new, and have to pass here the driver as an argument. Using the actions, we're gonna perform hover action, move to element, and perform. And since we are going to deal with inserting text into text fields, we have to implement a function that's gonna wait for a text box to appear and clear its contents and insert the new text. First of all, we have to wait for the element by accessibility identifier. If it's not found, we have to throw no such element exception. Now we can clear the element. It's gonna remove the existing text and we have to send keys, which is the text to be inserted. And that's pretty much it for the robot class. Now we are ready to implement our first scenario. Let's start with the splash screen as usual. Under end-to-end tests, I'm gonna add a new class. Let's call it main end-to-end test. And let's use here in the primary constructor itest output helper. It has to inherit from end-to-end test, pass here the output, and for cleanup, we need to implement iDisposable. After each test, we're gonna close the application, and let's do close application. Now for the first test, we need to make sure that the splash screen should be invisible when downloading, as we have done in the other applications. First of all, we have to launch the application. We're going to use the splash screen robot to assert that we have passed the splash screen. Therefore, let's go ahead and create the first robot, which is splash screen robot. We need to inject in constructor the Windows driver, Windows element, nullable, and you have to pass here the driver as an argument. We only have here one function, which is assert has passed splash screen. For the implementation is very simple. We have to wait and check if the text copyright exists. By doing wait and check if exists, we have to provide here the automation ID from UI constants, automation text copyright. And for the timeout, it has to be 1 second. Now we have to wait for the same element to disappear by doing wait until element gone in 1 second. If we don't have any exceptions, we have to return true. Just to get you up and running with this end-to-end test, this is a very simple scenario. We have to create the splash screen robot. After launching the application, we have to create an instance of the splash screen robot, and you have to pass here the driver. We can directly call the function has pass splash screen scene should be true. Before running the test, actually, make sure your WinApp driver is up and running. Make sure you have done PHP artisan serve and your PHP server and MySQL server are up and running. That's it, guys. It's the moment of truth. Let's run the test. Keep in mind, from this moment onward, if we have to do some refactoring to our code, we have to come back to the application, make the changes, and basically rebuild the application. All right, we have a problem. The timeout exception. So what's happening here is instead of wishlist click, we have to use on wishlist manager click. And that's why the application crashes. It is a silent crash. Let's come back to the layout section and we have to fix this. Let's close this it should be like this. Before running the application, I will rebuild everything. This is very good because we know for sure that Appium is communicating with our application. Let's run the test. All right, we don't see the window, therefore we have another exception. We have done here actually a typo. Set foreground window. All right, we have the splash screen. We have the application. Now, I don't know if the test has passed or not. It should basically close the application after test has passed. Test failed actually. Okay, to close the application basically. We are not able to close the application. This is random at this point. I have launched again the test and it's passed. All right, the problem here is the main window does not close after each test. Let's not use this. I'm going to surround this with try catch since it's going to throw an exception. In case of an exception, I'm not going to do anything. And what I'm going to do here, which is very hardcore. However, I don't have actually another choice except to kill all the process related to our application. And here I'm going to do finally after this block, or you can do this actually regardless. Now I'm going to loop over. Let's name this variable process. I'm going to use system diagnostics process, get processes by name, pocket goods. This is unreadable. All right. In processes, for each process, we're going to kill basically the process. Let's run again the test. Hopefully it's going to close all the windows. All right, that was it. And it solves the problem. That's pretty much it for this test. We can do the same thing that we have done in the other applications by doing the same scenarios. And we already know the scenarios. Therefore, let's create the needed robots. Afterward, we can easily focus on creating the needed scenarios. Create a new class. Let's call it product robot. The first function is page ready. I'm gonna wait until element is gone, which is the loading indicator. Now we have to assert that we have the correct product. We need to assert that is page ready. Let's arrange the list of products of type IEnumerable products of type products preview. Next, we have to loop over the products to scroll and check has correct data. Yet to be implemented, of course. If it's not able to scroll and check has correct detail, we have to return false. And if it passes all elements without returning false, we have to return true. All right. First things first, let's get the product element, which is UI element, by calling wait and scroll to element. Scrollable container, scroll viewer that we have defined under the main window. Main scroll viewer that has the automation ID main scroll viewer. Next argument, we have to pass the target element, which is identified by the product preview ID, and it has a placeholder to identify each element individually. The maximum attempt, 1. Now we have to check if the product is null. We're going to return false. Now we have to check the existence of this particular element. I'm going to copy the same thing here. If it does not exist, I'm going to return false. Now we can access the product card title. Let's store it under iWeb element. Let's try to get this element by using the automation ID and the products ID. We have to check if this products preview card is null. If it's null, we need to return false. Now it's time for the assertion. We need to make sure that this product has the correct title by doing basically the comparison between the product card title, which is the UI element, the dependency property text, and the product title. Let's make it case insensitive. Right off the bat, if this value is false, we have to return false. With the same logic, we have to get the products preview card price, and we have to compare the price. By doing try get UI element, we have to use the automation ID products preview price as a placeholder, and we have to replace the placeholder with products ID. Now, if this UI element is not found, we're gonna return false, and we have to check right now the correct data. Let's store this comparison under has correct price by doing string and equal as we have done earlier. Basically, I'm gonna copy the same thing the product card price and text, it has to match basically this kind of text. And we have to add as a second argument the product price. Now, if you have incorrect data, you have to return false, as we have done earlier. Afterward, if has correct price and has correct title, I'm gonna return true. All right, that's about it for this function. Let's implement, for example, the function can navigate to product from list. First of all, we have to assert that the page is ready, and let's arrange the product ID. Now we have to look for the product UI element matching the product ID as automation ID. Wait and scroll. Let's do, for example, 2 attempts. If we are not able to find this element, we have to throw no such element exception. Next, we have to hover over the element. It has to be Windows element. Let's wait for 500 milliseconds for the animation to finish. Next, we have to store the Learn More button with the same manner. We'll try to get the element by using the automation ID product preview Learn More button, and we have to identify this using the product ID. If it's not found, we have to throw an exception, no such element exception. Next, we have to click on Learn More button. Let's wait for 1 second and let's assert that the page is ready. All right, I'm gonna fold this. Now, after navigating to the product detail screen, we need to make sure that we have the correct detail. Let's arrange the product detail and let's look for the carousel components by doing get UI elements product detail carousel. Next, we have to get from the attribute help text the string representation of all the URLs shown under this carousel. Get attribute, which is help text. Now let's loop over the product detail media URLs, and we have to check if this particular URL belongs to this string. Now we have to check if the URLs doesn't contain basically this particular URL, we have to return false. Now we have to check that we have the correct title. We have to access the UI element product detail title. We need the text property to be compared to the product detail and title. Now, if this value has correct title is false, we have to return false. Now for the price, I'm gonna copy this product price or product detail price. It should match the same thing that we have done earlier, product detail. If it doesn't have the same price, we have to return false. With the same manner, we have to compare the description and return false or true accordingly. Now for the quantity, it's the same thing. Just in case, I'm gonna use the string. With the same manner, we have to check the category and let's check if we have the button, toggle button by doing get UI element, UI constants, automation ID, product detail, toggle wishlist button. Or instead, we have to do if exists, UI constants, automation ID, product detail, wishlist button. Let's call it has toggle button, for example. If it doesn't have this toggle button, I'm gonna return false. If all pass, we have to return true. Let's implement has correct suggested products. Let's arrange the search query. Actually, I'm not gonna hard code this. Let's do here search query. Now let's arrange the correct suggestions according to the search query. Next, we have to insert the search query into the text field. We can access this search input by the automation ID search input and search query. Let's wait for, 1 second, and we have to scroll and assert suggested products has correct data. And as we have done earlier, this function has to be created and implemented. If it doesn't have the correct data, have to return false. If all pass, have to return true. Let's create this method. Now we have to wait for the suggested UI element to exist, wait, and scroll to elements. The scrollable container is search input, and the element is identifiable by suggested products automation ID and the related ID. And let's set the max attempt to 1. Now we have to check if this element is found. If it's not found, we're going to return false. Let's wait for a while, and we have to check if the element exists, which is the product preview image. You have to check right now if the image exists under the scrollable container by using check if exists. If it does not exist, we have to return false. And we can access the image using the automation ID product preview image. and product ID as a second argument, and we have to return false if it's not found. Let's store the UI image under iWeb element by calling getUIElement. And if you do remember, we have added the help text for the URL in order to be accessible under our end-to-end test, thumbnail, image, and get attributes, and we have to pass here the attribute, which is help text. Now we have to compare the URL to the product thumbnail. If it doesn't have the correct thumbnail, we're going to return false. As we have done earlier, let's get the UI element suggested product title, and we have to compare the text to the product title as well as the category. If everything passes, we have to return true. And that's pretty much it for scroll and check suggested product has correct data. Now, after scrolling and making sure we have the correct data, I'm going to click on a particular item, and we have to make sure that we can navigate from the autocomplete search input. Let's call this function can navigate to product detail from suggested products. Let's arrange the correct product, and we have to insert as we have done earlier, and we have to wait for 1 second, and we have to scroll. If it's not found, we're going to throw an exception. We have done that earlier. Right now, what we have to do, I'm going to click on this particular suggested item. Let's wait for the navigation and the animation. I think 1 second will do. And let's assert that page is ready, which is the search result screen. Now we must be under the search result screen. Let's call this function can navigate to search result screen. Now, when to use this function can navigate to search result screen, once the user has inserted, for example, S under the search input, the user can click on the magnify icon to navigate to the search detail screen. Right off the bat, we have to insert some text to the search input, and let's wait for 1 second. Afterward, we have to look for the search button that has the automation ID search button. Let's store it under iWeb element search button. Now we can click on this search button. I'm going to increase basically the 2 or something like this, and let's click on the search button, and let's wait for 1 second before asserting that the page is ready. We're gonna make this assertion is page is ready in the next function. Now we are navigating to the search detail screen. We need to make sure that we have matching products. Let's call this function has matching products. First of all, we have to make sure that the page is ready. Before asserting its page is ready, let's arrange the correct products from the mock data. After the page is ready, we have to loop over the suggested products, and we need to call scroll and check has correct data that you have implemented earlier. If all pass, we have to return true. Now, if you have provided some non-existent product title or something like this, you have to check if the warning message is present. Let's wait for the page to be ready, and let's look for this UI element identified by the automation ID warning message. Next, we have to make the comparison between the text under the warning message and the text from the string resource to make sure that we have this warning message present in our screen. Warning message UI and text. Now we're going to compare basically this warning message text and the string resource text empty product list. And that's pretty much it for the product robot. I think that we have to stop here. For the next video, we're going to focus on the scenarios under product end-to-end test. See you in the next video, and happy coding.